Hey guys, Mike here from Mercado Airwaves. We want to thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network. And if you want to see what we're up to outside of the station, please follow us all over social media. I'm on Twitter at MikeMmedia and on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media. You can follow the good brother Alex Mercado on Twitter at Mercado21Alex and on Instagram at Mercado2121. The lovely Nicole Mancha is on all social media platforms at Typing When Tipsy. You can follow the network on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. Our pop culture show, The Good Brothers, on Twitter at Good Brothers Pod. Our true crime shows on Instagram at Murder, Mysteries, and More. And of course, like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. You can see all our videos on YouTube.com/Mike Mercado 2333 or by searching Mercado Airwaves Network. We play video games on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves Network. And of course, you can support our network by finding a tier just for you, whether you want early access, you want to be part of polls, you want to win contest prizes, by visiting us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. And we really appreciate it wherever you get your favorite podcast. So like, rate, review, and share us. And please spread the word. For the good brother, Alex Mercado, for the lovely Nicole Mancha, I'm Mike Mercado. Thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network.
And we are back to review episode 7 and 8 of ESPN's 30 for 30, The Last Dance. And it was a really emotional 2 episodes comparative to some of the others that we've seen previously on the series. And it really, I think the goal of these 2 episodes, before we really go down to some of the notes I took over the last 2 hours when we were watching this, they really try to show a certain perspective of Michael. And I think that's the one thing you're going to be able to take from episodes 7 and 8 specifically, especially it dealing with the death of his father and what he was dealing with post-retirement and playing baseball. And we'll get into all that in just a little bit here on Sports from the Couch. But I think that's the one thing we were supposed to take away from this, is what he was feeling, why he felt this way, and what it is like to have the mentality of Michael Jordan. And it really we start off right away with the death of Michael Jordan's father after they won the NBA Finals. And if you're a fan of the network, or if you're new to the network, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. We had on from NBC Sports Chicago, one of the best in the business who covers the Chicago Bulls and takes care of their entire podcast network over at NBC Sports, is Tony Gill. And before he got to NBC Sports, he did an entire series as a producer about the death of Michael Jordan's father. This is a story that we've been really interested in here on the network as well. There's an episode that was never released that we did about the death of Michael Jordan's father. So obviously we've been fascinated with this case. We get the story of it, and we get a very basic version of it. And there's a lot of great podcasts you can listen to out there, a lot of great research out there that you could really get the nitty gritty of it and all the twists and turns that it was. To me, what I took from it, right, from what I saw in these 2 episodes when they talked about Michael's father, was it was hard for me personally to ever give Michael the benefit of the doubt. And this is what I mean by that. I don't know the pain, thank God, of losing my father. And I have a lot of friends who have lost parents, and it seems like some of the most devastating moments in your life. But for some reason, when it came to Michael Jordan, I just never saw him as a human that way. I always thought it was just more part of the narrative, if you will. It was a great add-on to his story. You know, you had the flu game and the broken foot and, you know, his father's death. And to see some of that footage that we did, and to really see the emotion come out in him, I was wrong. I'm okay to admit it. I had no idea that it affected him that way. And I should know better, because why wouldn't the loss of a parent mean that much? Of course it would. He is human. But then they also tackled the controversy. And something that I believed in for a long time, and maybe in the tone of my voice and kind of where I'm leaning to, maybe you could see it change me a little bit, or at least persuade me just a tad bit. They go into the whole theory of, well, was Michael Jordan suspended? I don't know if he was or not, but I can see why a lot of people see it. Does seem a little fishy. You know, they do a good job of talking about his gambling and the shady characters he were around. But when you think about it, why would David Stern suspend his most profitable person with no real evidence of anything? And I thought that's as far as they would go when it comes to the controversy of the suspension, that it wasn't the death of his father that did it, that it wasn't the toll of the road that did it, that it was a suspension. And then they cover, well, was his father murdered because of his gambling and because he was tied up with the wrong people? And again, being of such a young age at that time, this was what, 94, 95, so I was 4 or 5 years old at that point. I didn't realize that the media really did go in on him, and it did make a lot of speculation And they did put a lot of rumor and innuendo out there. And I guess it makes sense because that's how it got to me. That's how it got to me after all these years. So the question I think they pose at this point of the documentary is, did Michael Jordan quit because of something he did behind the scenes? Or was he just done? Did he run out of steam? And honestly, at this point, I know for a long time I've had my theories. I'm starting to ease up on it. And maybe I drank the Kool-Aid. But yeah, I don't care how much of a cyborg you are. Unless you really are a T-1000, you're still human. And the death of your father and being the biggest star in the world and being as crazy as he was, and some of the stories we were told in these 2 episodes about the competitor and the teammate. Yeah, I could see him quitting, calling it a career, going away, and just being done with it. And it had nothing to do with gambling and a suspension. Then the documentary starts to take us to his baseball career. Oh, he's a baseball player now. This is the thing you got to give Jordan credit for, right? We're talking about a guy that hit 202 with 50 runs. This is a guy who hasn't played baseball since high school. Now, it's not the most athletic sport. It's not the most physically demanding sport, but it's the hardest sport in the planet. It's baseball. The hand-eye coordination. Try to hit a fastball, guys. Now try to hit a curveball. And it's one of the most difficult sports to pick up, let alone in AA baseball, where the true killers that are going to be in Major League Baseball. That's where they hang out. That's where the sharks are. And that's where Jordan had to go. I love that story that Jerry tells because he was so popular and there was so much media that he had to go to AA. It wasn't even a talent thing. But he's such a super athlete, and he picked it up so fast. And again, they're sugarcoating it, and this is, a documentary produced by Jordan. But damn, I think a lot of people got caught off guard that he was halfway decent in baseball. He's a super athlete. And not just a super athlete. It's not like a guy coming from a sport that, yeah, he's athletic, but it's not the top. He's an NBA. He's the greatest NBA player of all time. Yeah, he's a little athletic. I'm not surprised that he picked up baseball. And at the same token, you should see why guys like Mike Trout and Chris Bryant and Arenado and Javi Baez and all these guys, Manny Machado and some of the boys down in the White Sox, Luis Robert, why when they have so much power and when they're so devastating at the plate, why it's such a big deal, because it's so hard. Even Michael Jordan, the robot, couldn't have done it. And this is around the time when Michael is making the transition into baseball, where they talk about how he was as a teammate. And there's that old urban legend that's true that he bought his team a really cool bus so that they could ride in comfort style, because obviously we all know some of the nightmares that are traveling in minor league baseball. And that's juxtaposed to how he was as a teammate in the NBA. And these 2 episodes were finally those moments. Look, for sports fans in Chicago, no matter your age, if you're a Bulls fan, you've always heard how Michael was on the court and how he was in the practice facility. We've always known this. And I think now for a new generation and for people who weren't in the day-to-day Chicago sports media circle, they saw what he was. And the first story we hear about this is Scott Burrell. Poor Scott Burrell. And this is a guy who, for all the stories I read, said he's a nice guy. He took it all, but he also hit big shots, and Michael trusted in him. And Michael talks about how this is the guy I need to pull the rope. And I think what he's basically saying is, if this is the worst guy that we're going to have playing, I need him to be at his best. Michael mentions it that he would never ask you to do something that he wouldn't do. Whether you could do it as good as he can, that's a different story. But you have to put in the effort and you have to put in the work in. It's funny because they're talking about all this and we get to the infamous Scottie Pippen led Bulls. Michael drove a lot of these guys to greatness, right? So Michael leaves. And the residual effect is this is still a winning team. There's still good players on this roster, especially right after Michael leaves. But then we get to this crossroads of a moment. And I think this is something that a lot of us were more surprised after all the stories were told how Scottie reacted to it. But we get that moment. The team steps up. They're one of the better teams in the NBA. They get a series against the Knicks. And 1.8 seconds. Phil Jackson draws up a play. Tony Kukoc is the guy that's going to take the last shot. Now, they mentioned in the documentary that they've done this a few times, and Tony has hit a lot of these shots, and Scottie wanted nothing of it. Phil goes up to him and says, "Are you in or are you out?" And Scottie says, "I'm out." And of course, Tony Kukoc hits the game winner. And they do a great job in the documentary showing that this team was pissed. They walk down the tunnel and they do a great job of showing you that there was this weird tension there. And they have that great story about Bill Cartwright crying, saying that you quit on this, Scotty. And Michael even saying that it's going to haunt him. And you have all these guys who are defending Scotty, who are saying that that was out of his character, that he would never do that. And they leave with Scotty saying, I would do it again. That's not a good look. And Scotty gets a lot of crap for it. Well deserved, though. That's the complicated relationship I have personally with Scottie Pippen. One of the greatest players of all time. One of the greatest Bulls of all time. There's just a lot of moments, though, where Scotty just did himself no favors. As much as we talk about Jerry Krause never doing himself any favors, and of course, putting all this pressure on Tony Kukoc, and Tony Kukoc had to deal with it because Jerry wouldn't shut the hell up, Scotty never helped himself out. And there were moments that you could see Scotty could be the man. And he just never did it. And that is the difference, though. Throughout this entire episode of episode 7 and episode 8, when they're talking about leadership and practices, the killer instinct and the mentality that Michael Jordan had is why they won 6 championships. Scottie Pippen developed into one of the top 50 players of all time. One of the greatest players on one of the greatest teams of all time. But that difference in mentality, the more easiness, the softness when it came to the way he would interact with his teammates was different than Michael. Michael would have taken the last shot. He would have gotten the ball. He would have made something happen. Scotty could have made something happen. He didn't. The Bulls still won. But it didn't mean anything. They still lost that series. And it's a weird relationship because people always talk about Scotty could have won without Michael. Talent-wise, maybe if he developed the same way without Michael, that's how great he was. And it's just interesting that he didn't take it back, that he still kind of just kept to his guns. So shout out to him for sticking to his guns, but an interesting reaction of Scotty quitting on the team in that Knicks series. And then we fast forward to the Chicago Bulls sweeping the New Jersey Nets. Scott Burrell snaps. So shout out to Scott Burrell dealing with all that BS from Michael, and it's having a great game. And then we get to the end of episode 7 with one of the weird emotional moments of the show. And this is the one that really stuck with me. And this is the one that kind of, even throughout episode 8, I just kept coming back to. And why don't you guys check it out? This is from ESPN 30 for 30's The Last Dance. This is the end of episode 7.
When people see this, they're going to say, well, he wasn't really a nice guy. He may have been a tyrant. Oh, well, that's you, because you never wanted anything. I wanted to win, but I wanted them to win and be a part of that as well. Look, I don't have to do this. I'm only doing it because it is who I am. That's how I played the game. That was my mentality. If you don't want to play that way, don't play that way. Break.
What does that all mean? I think this is what I got from it. The entire episodes of 7 and 8, beyond the championships and the complications of him dealing with his father and retirement, was about, is Michael Jordan a nice guy? Was he a good teammate? And when I heard that, kept going back to it, and then the clips came out, kept listening to it. And all I got from it, playing armchair psychiatrist, this is a man who was frustrated that nobody understands why he was the way he was. And a lot of that has to go with the same reason why he might not be the best executive in the world. Maybe he's not the greatest coach in the world. Because nobody's like Michael Jordan. Nobody can do the things he can. Nobody can think the way he can. And episode 8 does a great job of that type of mindset that he had. Punching teammates, yelling at them, insulting them, trying to break them down. Because he wanted to be the best, not just great, the best that ever did it. And when you want to be that, and when you have that mentality, people can't keep up with you. And that's frustrating. And it's frustrating when people can't understand what you want, when people can't do what you do. And I think that's where that emotion came from. I don't think Michael Jordan cares how you or I think about him. I think he'd care less. But I think he wanted people to know why he did the things he did. I think the emotion of, this is who I am and you guys just don't understand it. And it's not my fault. And that's what I gathered from it. And this leads right into episode 8. And episode 8 goes right into the Hornets series in the next round after they beat the Nets. And BJ goes in, and obviously the Bulls are a big favorite. They're one of the best teams in the NBA. And BJ goes off because he knows, quotes, knew how to beat them. And apparently he enjoyed it a little too much. So then they tell us this old urban legend of LeBradford. I've never heard of this guy, okay? LeBradford Smith, who played for the Washington Bullets. Well, he goes off against Michael Jordan in 93. And the story goes that LeBradford tells Michael, nice game, Mike. So it's a back-to-backer. So one game in Washington, one game in Chicago. Michael then proceeds to Thanos poor LeBradford and puts 36 on him in the first half. So this entire time they're building up this story, they're telling us it's old lore in the NBA in Chicago. We then find out that the entire story was made up. He made up the entire thing. He made up that this man went to him in the hallway of the arena and told him, nice game, Mike. They didn't even make up a lie in saying that he said something about his mom, about his dog, or that his breath stink. No. He said, nice game, Mike. Michael Jordan puts up 36 in the first half. It was all a lie. He made it up to get himself hyped. He is not normal. And it goes to show why he would do the things he did. So then, it's no surprise that after BJ Armstrong is celebrating this a little too hard, and we hear the great line of Michael saying,
well, that's all right. Let's see if all that trash talking starts when it's 0-0 instead of 5-6 point lead. That's where it starts. That's the sign of a good man. If you can talk shit when it's even score, or talk shit when you're behind score. When you're ahead, it's easy to talk.
And sure enough, Michael Jordan goes off, destroys poor BJ Armstrong, and the Bulls win the series 4-1. And then we are heading into what are my New York Knicks of my generation, of my era. We are going to head into this series against the Pacers. But then we go back in time to 1995. They talk about the MLB strike. I wonder if the MLB strike doesn't happen, if Michael comes back. Because all of a sudden, Michael's having lunch with BJ Armstrong. The news just came out, Mike is not crossing the lines. He's not going to be a scab, quote unquote scab. And he's starting to practice with BJ. And then slowly, practices get a little bit more intense. They get a little bit more intense. The news finds out. And we get the most famous unretirement of all time. I'm back. Now, what was interesting is the team was struggling. I didn't know this about that season when Michael came back from retirement, that they were a team that was just above 500. Michael comes back, and it's a different Bulls team. That's another interesting point that the documentary makes, that when Michael came back from retirement, it was a different team. For example, Horace Grant was in Orlando. Orlando, a great up-and-coming team, too. I'll talk about that in a little bit. I love those Orlando Magic teams. And of course, Michael's first game back is against the Pacers. And that's when number 45 shows up. Again, this documentary does a great job of showing us that Michael was human. Because he was rusty, he was nervous. The dude had his shorts on backwards. And then, of course, Michael did Michael things and got into a groove. But the Pacers won that game. And it was from that moment on, after Michael hits a game-winning shot against Atlanta, that the Bulls are just off and running. And then Michael would go off for 55 points in the Garden. Unreal, man. He was unreal. And then we get that famous Bulls versus Magic series in the semis. And we think about that Magic team. Shaq, Penny, Nick Anderson, Horace. That's a good Orlando team. And I love that quote that Nick Anderson told Horace Grant, that 45 isn't 23. And then what does Michael do? That crazy psychopath goes back to number 23 and then drops 38 points and a win. But they talk about it, though. It's funny. It's a different athlete because they talk that Michael was not in the same game shape that he was because he was in baseball shape. And it's true. It's two different sports. And on top of that, his mentality wasn't there too. He was still just trying to get right. That was a very young, hungry Orlando Magic team. So it was kind of inevitable, if you ask me. As great as Michael was, that team, new faces. He didn't have his legs under him. He was kind of growing his body differently. He was working out his body differently for a baseball season. In the middle of an NBA season comes back. The Magic would win the series 4-2, but I think they needed that. And in the documentary, a few guys mentioned it that might have been the catalyst of what drew them to their next big three-peat. But we get a Space Jam sighting too. That's always fun. We see that he was filming Space Jam when all this was happening, and we've all heard the rumors and we've all heard the legend of it. But yeah, we see that Warner Brothers and that entire staff built him an amazing indoor court, like this dome. And then they made him a weight set, and it was just amazing. You know, obviously Michael did Michael things. I love the behind the scenes where we're seeing the green screen guys just play defense on him. Like, hey, make sure. I imagine being the one guy got a little too feisty and tried to swipe at the ball. Michael would be like, you know what? Let me put on the green screen myself. I'll do it better than you. we finally get the culmination of the entire story of it's Michael a good guy. We've been teased with it about Scott Burrell. They've talked about him talking trash to them and going after them at practice. We finally get the Steve Kerr story. We've obviously heard that when Michael punched Will Perdue and that confrontation. The Steve Kerr one was a really interesting one because that would always seem to be the more go-to story, at least here in Chicago. And we finally got to really hear what happened. It had to deal with practice. Michael didn't like how a lot of these guys came in with the attitude of like the prestige of the Chicago Bulls. He thinks that, you haven't earned it. You're not part of those championship teams. Next thing we know, he gets in a fight with Steve Kerr. And Michael says, I got into a fight with the smallest guy in the court. I felt like the smallest person in the world. Asked for Steve Kerr's number. They end up being cool. They're off and running. We have the 72-10 Bulls. One of the best teams ever. They talk about Scotty looking at the calendar and be like, we might not lose a game until 3 months from now. And it brought in the question of, is that the best Bulls team in the entire dynasty? Is that 95, 96, 72-10 Bulls? Probably is, right? Dennis Rodman, Michael, Scotty, Phil. That was probably their best team, I would think. But 72-10, we just had the Golden State Warriors win, 73 games? And again, they didn't win the championship. I've always been where the record's impressive, but you got to admit, 72-10 with don't mean a thing without a ring, really that's some real gangster-ish stuff right there. And the fact that they pulled it off, and they were so confident about it, and the fact that they it's almost like the NBA gods loved Michael Jordan. Because what is the rematch that they get in the conference finals that year? After going 72-10, this is Michael's first full season back, has had all this, turbulation with his teammates in the beginning of the season. Who does he so happen to meet in the conference finals? Oh, that Orlando Magic team that bounced him last year. And what do you think happened? Of course, the Bulls would sweep them. I know a lot of people don't like putting stock into momentum and the universe and all that. And I get it. You can't put any statistical value to it. You can't bet on it, right? But man, sometimes things just work out for people. Sometimes the planets are just aligned all the time for a person or a team. And that was this case, right? Every single moment. Oh, this is where we failed. They get another crack at it. They do it. They beat them. That's the entire story of it. And I guess that's what greatness is you just mow down people like that. And then we get to my first sports memory that it's in my sports bank, in my little brain of mine, is the Bulls versus the Supersonics in the NBA Finals. I would have been 6 years old at the time of this NBA Finals. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I remember every play, I remember anything like that, but if you've heard us here on the network, one of my first sports memory is seeing the opening of the NBA Finals, and when they were in Seattle, they would have their mascots come down, and they had this whole special effects of like the Yeti and whatnot. So this is one of my first sports memory, was watching this series. Now, what I didn't know, and again, the documentary, you got to give it a shout out to, is kind of filling out those blanks for a lot of us who didn't know everything or weren't old enough to know everything. I did not know that there was such a big gap in people's picks. Obviously, everyone was going to pick the 72-10 Michael Jordan-led Bulls. But people just showing so much disrespect to Gary Payton and to Sean Kemp and to George Karl. But nothing was more disrespectful than what Michael did when he saw the infamous tablet.
A lot of people back down the bike. I didn't. I made it a point. I said, just tire him out. Tire the out of him. You just got to tire him out. And I kept hitting him and banging him and hitting him and banging him. It took a toll on Mike. It took a toll. And then I feel myself resting him a little bit. And then the series changed. And I wish I could have did it earlier. I don't know if the outcome would have been different, but it was a difference and beating him down a little bit.
The glove. I had no problem with the glove. I had no problem with Gary Payton. I had a lot of other things on my mind.
Unreal. That was in reference to Gary Payton after the Sonics go down 3-0 to the Bulls, that he starts guarding Michael. And that was a big storyline apparently during that time, is why isn't Gary Payton, the defensive player of the year, the glove, guarding the best player in the league? To have that reaction is crazy, man. I get it. What else do you expect from Michael, right? But man, that not only was that shady, that was disrespectful. And even worse for Michael. Now, I wonder how much of it was in jest, but that came off bad. But I shouldn't be surprised, right? It is Michael. This is the same guy that when they're at a restaurant, he says that George Karl snobs him because of ignoring him. And then Michael's like, all right, yeah, I got something for you. As if Winning an NBA championship isn't enough motivation for this man. No, he needed to be slighted, or at least made himself feel slighted. And it finally comes full circle. The Seattle Supersonics do make a little bit of a series from it. Jordan does struggle with Gary Payton on him, to be honest. The Bulls lose the next two, but Michael does Michael things, and the Psycho wins another NBA championship. And we get the famous moment of seeing Michael crying with the basketball. On Father's Day, Game 6 of the NBA Finals, after his father's death, Michael wins his first championship without his dad. And we get that shot of Michael crying into that ball, that famous picture. And this was the first time I think we've ever heard Michael actually sobbing.
All right, guys, give him a break, all right? Yeah, that's all right. Come on, guys. We'll give him a break. Guys, that's not guys. That's not here. That's enough. All right? Guys, that's enough.
And there was something so primal about it, something so sad about it, something real about it. And obviously, the dude lost his father. And it goes full circle, just like this episode 7 and 8 did, kind of making it one thing. It's the same thing for me. It's when we saw that and we actually heard him crying, just letting it out. Yeah, man, losing his dad really affected him. Much more than I thought it did. And I should have known better. And we are set up for the final 2 episodes of The Last Dance as we get the setup to one of the best Eastern Conference Finals of all time in the 1998 matchup of the Chicago Bulls versus the Indiana Pacers. Woo! I cannot wait to finish this series. It has been an amazing journey. What did you guys think about episodes 7 and 8? What did I miss? What did you love? What did you hate? What did you learn? Let us know wherever you guys follow us on the socials. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media and on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media. You can like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Like, rate, review, and share us wherever you get your favorite podcast at Mercado Airwaves. Subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network. Come play video games with us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves Network. And check us out on patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves Network, the home to our interviews with athletes and celebrities that you can get ad-free and before anyone else. Thank you so much for joining us for our review of episodes 7 and 8 of The Last Dance. Join us next week as we review the finale of The Last Dance, episodes 9 and 10, here on Sports from the Couch on the Mercado Airwaves Network. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. We will see you next time. For everybody here at Mercado Airwaves, thank you so much for joining us here on Sports from the Couch. I'm Mike Mercado.
Hey guys, Mike here from Mercado Airwaves. We want to thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network. And if you want to see what we're up to outside of the station, please follow us all over social media. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media and on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media. You can follow the good brother Alex Mercado on Twitter at Mercado21Alex and on Instagram at Mercado2121. The lovely Nicole Mancha's on all social media platforms at Typing When Tipsy. You can follow the network on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves, our pop culture show, The Good Brothers, on Twitter at Good Brothers Pod, our true crime shows on Instagram at Murder, Mysteries, and More, and of course, like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. You can see all our videos on youtube.com/Mike Mercado 2333 or by searching Mercado Airwaves Network. We play video games on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves Network, and of course, you can support our network by finding a tier just for you, whether you want early access, you want to be part of polls, you want to win contest prizes, by visiting us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. And we really appreciate it wherever you get your favorite podcast to like, rate, review, and share us. And please spread the word. For the good brother, Alex Mercado, for the lovely Nicole Mancha, I'm Mike Mercado. Thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network.